The IP address options are located on your adapter, which can be found in the Network and Sharing Center. There's several ways you can get there, but let's go ahead and start this way. I'm going to go to the search menu and type in the word network. And you'll see here in the list as it builds the Networking and Sharing Center. Underneath this, in Change Adapter Settings, here's my adapter. I want to go into this adapter, so I'm going to right-click on it and go to the properties for this adapter. And here towards the bottom is where you'll see the IP address settings for both IP version 6 and IP version 4. Now, you want to be kind of careful. If you hit the check boxes and turn these off, that means that this particular server doesn't have a protocol to communicate with. And so I'm going to turn them back on. Now, we'll focus on IPv6 a little bit later in this module. Right now, let's go ahead and take a look at IPv4, and I want to see the properties of IPv4. You can either double-click this name or click on Properties. And here's where we'll find its IP address configuration. Now, we have the option here right at the top to obtain an IP address automatically, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the module on Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP, getting that set up, and then having, well, mainly client machines pull addresses automatically, so we don't have to manage them in like an Excel spreadsheet. Right now, I have an IP address on this server statically assigned. And as you can, if you take a look at the IP address, one of the first things I notice is 192.168. That rings a bell. It's a Class C address, so I check the subnet mask. The subnet mask should have the first three octets masked out. I also recognize that 192.168 is a private IP address, which means it's not internet routable, which is common on most internal networks today to use one of the private IP addresses. I also have a default gateway. Now, this is the router that's on my network that'll allow me to leave my network, go to another network, or go to the internet. And I have the IP address for that router listed here. And I also have a DNS address. Now, I only have one current DNS server here, and we'll talk more about DNS servers in the modules in this course. And so I've got that DNS server set up so I get basic name resolution. So I have my IP settings already entered. I want you to notice something. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say obtain automatically. And when I do this, have your eyes catch this area right up here. When I click this, we get a new option called alternative configuration. And while we will talk more about this, let me kind of explain what this is for. If you have a machine, such as a laptop, that will be in an office network and then might be taken home to a different network, this allows you to configure two different IP configurations. Perhaps while I'm at home or at the office, I'm going to pick up an IP address automatically, and when I'm at the other location, I want to have a very specific IP address labeled. So if the first dynamic one fails, go to this IP address setting. Now, in my case, I don't want that right now. So let me go ahead and turn this off and go back to General. And I'm going to configure a static IP setting. I need to make sure I get this typed in correctly. This is one of the common places to make mistakes, either in the IP address itself or the subnet mask. Now, using a private address makes this easier to deal with rather than having something that's been subnetted or supernetted, because I can easily glance to see that those three octets, the first three, have been masked out. And I can put in my default gateway. Again, another area that is common for a mistake to be made. Once I'm satisfied, I can say OK, but I want to show you the advanced settings here. So if you take a look here, I can go to advanced. In advanced, we get some additional settings. Again, DNS and WINS, we're going to look at a little bit later. These have settings on how we work with DNS. But take a look at the IP settings here. You'll notice that there's my IP address setting, and I also have a gateway. Well, we can add additional ones. And you might be asking why you would want an additional IP address. This is actually common in a lot of different scenarios. One scenario is a web server may need to have multiple IP addresses, one for each website that it hosts. Also, in high availability solutions, working with products like Exchange or SQL, we add an additional IP address as part of that cluster configuration. So let me show you what's going to happen. We're going to go ahead and click Add, and I'm going to add an additional address, and I'm going to put it on the same network. And I'm going to say .200, put it on the same network, and I'm going to click Add. You can see it listed here now. That means that this computer will now respond and communicate on both those addresses. I'm going to go down here and say OK because I want to acknowledge all of this so that we can test it. Now I can click this box that says to validate this on exit, but I'm going to test it using a Windows native program, one that you're probably familiar with. I'll open up, in this case it's PowerShell that I've opened up, and I'm going to clean up the screen and use the Windows native command ping, and I'll ping the first address, 168.0.103. You can see I get a response from that, and I'll ping the second address and show you that it responds as well, and that was .200. There we go. Besides the Windows native command ping, there's also a PowerShell command called test connection that works very similar. So I'm going to put in test connection and IP address 192.168.0.103. And you can see that it's going to run through and do basically a ping and show me my addresses that are on there. I can also use it in quiet mode, and I like quiet mode because in quiet mode, I can go in and tell it how many ping counts I want it to do, just one. And what quiet mode does is it comes back and gives me a true or false. And a lot of times if you want to script or automate to test if a machine is online, getting back a true or a false is a great way to do it. Easier to work with than ping. Now, this isn't the only way to get to the networking and sharing center. In fact, there's a couple of other ways I want to show you real quick. One of the common ways on a server is if you are in Server Manager, I'll open this up. You'll see this option called Configure this local server. Now, let your eyes take a look over here to local server. That's what it's going to flip to when you click this. So you can click either one, local server or configure this server. It takes you to the same place. And I want you to notice that down here, it'll show you your adapter and it shows you the current setup. And it says I have multiple IPv4 addresses and IPv6 has been enabled. I'm going to click on this and you'll see that it brings me right back to my network connections where I can go into properties and I can go in and alter this configuration. And I'm going to go in and remove that second address. I'll remove it. I'll say OK so that the settings get set on the adapter. Also, one last way, and this is one of the most common ways, I'm going to call up Control Panel. You can do it from command line, or you can do it right from here on the search. Call up Control and find Control Panel. And this is a very common way that you may have used several times to get to it. So it's under Network and Internet, and you'll find the Network and Sharing Center. And that's where you get to your adapter settings.